Hi everybody, it's Love Your Instrument Month here at the Ottawa Folklore Centre, and so we've decided to talk about violins briefly. Many of you may have decided that you want to take up the violin, and you may have an old violin at home, and so what I want to go through with you today is just a few things that you can look for on your instrument to see if it's ready for you to play. The first thing that you could look for when I take it, that I look for when I take a violin out of a case, is the bridge. Now the bridge is not glued to the top, it's just sitting there with string tension, but it should be fitted properly to the top in that the feet should fit perfectly on the radius of the top of the instrument. Now I'll bring this in a little bit closer so that you can see. The bridge should also be completely vertical. In fact, the back of the bridge and the top of the instrument should create a 90-degree angle. And it should be flat on the back. Many times over the years, bridges tend to curl forward, and that is to lean forward, like this old bridge here. I don't know if you can see that, but it definitely has a curve it just leans forward. Here's a larger bass bridge, same kind of deal, just bigger, but I've decided to pull it out so you can see the big curve on that. That's the type of curve that that happens to bridges over time. Not a big deal, but you will have to have that bridge replaced and fitted to your instrument. So that's one. If the bridge is sitting perfectly straight like that, you're good to go. Now, another thing about the bridge is the positioning of the bridge. If you'll notice that you have F-holes on the top of the instrument, in the F-holes you will notice that there are tiny little notches. The bridge should be positioned between the notches of the F-hole. That's the proper position of the bridge. Okay, now another thing that I'll look for on an old instrument to see if it's ready to go is the sound post. A sound post is literally a post that goes inside the instrument from just behind the foot on the treble side of the instrument to the back of the instrument. It's very important to have in there to give your instrument stability as well as improve the tone. Now I'll just bring this in a little bit closer so that if you can see where it is, but if you look through the F-hole you may see a post. If your instrument doesn't have a post, very likely it's rattling around inside the instrument, and if that's the case, certainly don't tune it up yet. That post will have to be set up properly before you put tension on the strings. Now, another important area to observe is the bottom of the instrument, the lower bout. Often separation occurs in this area because there's so much tension. All the string tension is focused on this one area, and so it tends to open up the seams in this area. So have a good look at the bottom of your instrument. Make sure that there are no gaps or separations between the top and the sides of the instrument. If you see gaps, have them glued up before you put more string tension on it. This has to be made solid before it could be used. All right, now I want to talk about violin pegs. Often an older instrument has dried out because of a lack of humidity. And so over the years, the pegs don't seem to fit so well and don't work too well. So if you're tuning your pegs and you find that they're very stiff in turning, creaky, or sometimes they don't move at all, it's probably a good idea that you should have those looked after. I'll just bring this in a little bit closer and you can have a look at the pegs on this old violin, and you'll notice that the tips of the pegs have extended beyond the side wall of the peg box. And that's a good indicator that this instrument has dried out and the pegs are going deeper and deeper into their respective holes. Now a peg also has, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little hole right in the center of this peg. And of course on this peg the hole is right beside the peg box, so the string that goes through the hole is pushing against the side of the peg box, and that is giving this instrument difficulties in tuning. So these pegs should be refitted, and if you find that your old violin has this kind of problem, just bring them in and have new pegs put in, and you'll save yourself a world of grief. Okay, now the other part of the tuning system are the fine tuners. If you look at your violin, you may notice that if it's an older violin, a lot of the older violins didn't have fine tuners, or perhaps they had one old fine tuner adjuster just on the high E string. I'll bring that a little bit closer so you can have a look. Now this instrument has 4 fine tuners, and that certainly makes your life a lot easier. If you don't have these fine tuners, they can certainly be added to your existing tailpiece, or we also sell integral tailpieces. This is a new tailpiece that you can add, and it has built-in fine tuners, and these they're not too expensive, a little bit more expensive than the individuals, but they do work a little bit better, and it's just a nicer, neater package. So that could be added to an old violin as well. Now, lastly, I'd like to talk about neck angle. Neck angle is important. Many times over the years, a neck angle will drop, well, it will fall down just from the tension of the strings. It tends to pull everything up, and the fingerboard extension seems to drop down. And so what you end up with is strings that are quite high above the fingerboard. And if that's the case, you may need a neck reset, or if it's a cheaper violin, sometimes we can just modify the bridge a little bit just to make it playable. But another thing that you want to check is to make sure that the fingerboard is level. I use a straight edge on the fingerboard. You can use a small steel 6-inch ruler, maybe a good thing to use, but just a straight edge. If you put that between the strings on the fingerboard, you will notice, or you should notice, a slight gap in the middle of the straight edge, and just the tips of the straight edge should be touching the fingerboard. Now that gap, as I say, should be a slight gap, no more than a millimeter or so. If the straight edge is rocking back and forth on a hump on the fingerboard, that's a good indicator that you'll have to bring that in and have it planed out, and have the fingerboard straightened or dressed. So that could be done too. So hopefully that helps. That's just a few of the basic things to look for on an old violin that you might be thinking of playing.